A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Is it really as bad as people are saying it is? Is it really as boring? Is it really showing a slow decline for the Game of Thrones franchise as we know it? I'm going to say no. Definitively no. I don't think it's a sign that the franchise is slowly declining or going nowhere, or that people are losing interest in it. I think it's actually revitalizing the franchise a bit. I'm sorry if this video feels a little all over the place. I have some notes, but this is basically just stream of conscious and my thoughts on A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and the franchise, just because I got done watching episode 3 and wanted to talk about it. So take from that what you will. But if you don't know what A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is, it is a new television facet of George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire franchise. It's the latest Game of Thrones-esque show to hit HBO's streaming services. The main synopsis of it is that it is a series based on a series of 3 novellas that George R.R. Martin has already published, and it centers around the adventures of Sir Duncan the Tall, a hedge knight, and his young squire, who is a bald-headed little boy with a lot of secrets, who's named Egg. And basically the duo travels the many areas of Westeros, just doing what hedge knights do, just doing what squires do, and, you know, being a comedic little duo. I know the thumbnail makes it seem like maybe the show is bad or it's not being perceived well. It's actually doing very well for only having 3 episodes out. It's props to them for the amazing reviews it's gotten so far. However, I have seen a few negative, not really reviews, but just comments from viewers themselves who aren't really huge fans of it. But the only reasons I can really find that they say they're not huge fans of are a few little, they coalesce into a few little areas, mostly being that it's boring, too slow, nothing's happening, no action, yada yada, etc, etc. But all I have to say to people who say it's boring, or like their only critique is that nothing is happening, it's too slow, whatever the fuck they're saying, brother, go eat like just the biggest pile of dookie shit that you can find, because this show is so damn refreshing that it is actually giving me hope for the future of the world and this franchise as a whole. And I think that's saying a lot considering what we've gotten recently. But I have been so burnt out with the state of House of the Dragon. It is genuinely unreal how disinterested I am feeling about future seasons and the upcoming season 3, just based on how season 2 was. And I think that's saying a lot, because we all know that Game of Thrones had such a peak its first, like, I would say 5 seasons, and then it slowly started declining a bit. It slowly started downgrading into, like, that piss-poor last season that no one literally in the entire world enjoyed, or continues to enjoy. New fans watch the show, and they're like, fuck, you guys weren't kidding when you said this show ended on such a bad note. We ain't lying. It was bad, and it still continues to remain in popular media as one of the worst, I would argue one of the worst seasons that has ever come of a show, let alone a finale of a show. A series finale of an entire show. That's crazy, to have such a legacy of being so poor and such a bad ending. That's crazy. Because it's crazy to think with just how poorly Game of Thrones ended, that we were all in the trenches thinking nothing good could probably ever come of the series and Game of Thrones media again. But then, we got a beacon, a light at the end of the tunnel to redeem the horrible taste that season 8 left in everyone's mouth. This new series was going to be a phoenix that would hopefully stoke the cinders of vindication from the ashes that was the Game of Thrones finale, and hopefully bring it out from the ruin and into something just so incredible. And that was going to be House of the Dragon. And I will say, I think season 1 delivered. I think season 1 successfully raised everyone's expectations for how poorly Game of Thrones ended, and it gave people like a spark of hope that, like, maybe we could have something good come from this franchise again. And honestly, season 1, great, fantastic. The only note, I have a few qualms with it, but those qualms mostly being with the lighting in that one episode, because what the fuck were we thinking? We couldn't film at night. But I don't understand. I don't understand why we did that. I hope to God they never do it again. I hope they learn their lesson with that. But other than that, I think season 1 is just chef's kiss. Beautiful, brilliant. I love everything they did with it. And then we got season 2. Season 2 to me is just there. You know, it has its moments. It has its good, you know, hard hitting. I think the first episode really, you know, it set our expectations so high. And then it got worse. It just went downhill from there. And what I think season 2 of House of the Dragon and, season 8 as well of Game of Thrones and the subsequent seasons before it, leading up to it, I think what this is indicating for the franchise as a whole is just plain and simple writer's fatigue and maybe director's fatigue or showrunner's fatigue. I don't know what the exact, issue is, but I personally think it all has to do with George not really being involved in a lot of aspects of these shows anymore and being involved in the process in general. For both series, he had a decent amount of input into it, and he was, talking with everyone, communicating, and then there were times he left. For Game of Thrones, I think it was around season 5 or, somewhere around there. Granted, I will give Game of Thrones a little bit of slack, but just marginal slack, only because there was no source material for them to go off of after a certain point. So obviously it made sense that George didn't really have a lot of input after that. Because the directors and showrunners and writers are going off of previous material. They don't really have anything for future to go off of. And so they're kind of coming up with their own plot lines and storylines. Where I think the issue with that is, though, that even though George didn't have any input, there was no source material to work from, yada yada, I don't know how you could have come up with a worse ending to your series that was hopefully going to have 10 seasons, and then it dwindled to 8, and then that 8th season wasn't even really a full season. It was like a half-baked season. I wouldn't be surprised if the writers and everyone on the show was just ready to be done with it, and they were like, "But here's some crap to go out." Kind of like another popular series that had a 10-year run and just ended with one of the most controversial endings probably ever. What can I say? So yeah, maybe it's just a running pattern with these shows that they don't want to run as long as fans and them would hope for, and so they're just kind of like, we'll crap out whatever, and fans will eat it up, which they don't. I wonder if a lot of these Hollywood people think that their fans of these shows are just dumb and kind of will just eat up whatever. Now, as for House of the Dragon and it only having 2 seasons out, I think they started off so strong, and then it's just kind of steamrolling into a pile of shit, and it's using CGI dragons to hopefully raise audience morale and be like, guys, the show is good. It is good. You know why? It's because we have dragons, Dragons will raise the ratings for the show. And it'll distract from the fact that we just have poor writing and poor dialogue choices and plot elements going on in our series. The dragons will save us from hell. But let's say it all together now as an audience. Dragons do not make the entire show. They are a large facet of the show. However, they do not create and make the entire show. They are a staple in it, but they don't write the show. They don't move the dialogue. They don't move the characters. They're just a facet of it. Your audience is not children. They're still going to notice bad writing and plot elements that just don't really make sense or don't add up, especially when you're comparing it to the original source material that you're just like, stylistically, why did they make that choice? Even if you flash sequences of dragons every few episodes to kind of be like, guys, reminder, they're here, the audience is not going to be like, oh my god, guys, dragons, the dragons are back. Because, they're not toddlers. We're not toddlers, We can only experience Rhaenyra pacing around Dragonstone so many episodes and repeating the same line over and over before we're like, fuck, man, I get it. I fucking get it. We got it the first time. We don't need to keep hearing it every single episode. And it's the same with every other character. Season 2 felt like they were just, every episode was a repeat and a rehash and a regurgitation of the previous episode with some new elements thrown in. And they were just kind of like, the dragons will move the story. Sure, fuck it, I guess. And I know George wasn't really involved with season 2, so, not to say correlation equals causation, but when you have series where it shows that the original source creator is not really heavily involved, and there tends to be a lot of mixed reviews on how it goes, there might be some correlation there. Now, for House of the Dragon, I know he was involved with Ryan Condal, the showrunner, on season 1, and they worked out great, and then supposedly their relationship has turned abysmal. That, that is a he said, she said kind of thing, or a he said. We're not behind the scenes. We don't know their relationship. Ryan Condal says, George wasn't willing to work with him. George says that he was butchering his characters, for plot. Who's to say how their relationship has actually been or what actually happened? We are just not privy to that information. But I still think there might be a little bit of correlation with that, but, don't sue me for saying that. Don't crucify me. It's just a thought. just a theory, you know? So anyway, I could go on and on. I can make an entire another video about my issues with season 2 of House of the Dragon, but that's a video for another day. I reiterate all of these elements of the last 2 series of House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones just to emphasize the point that A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms feels so fucking refreshing compared to those last few seasons of both series. And I think one of those reasons is the writing is just, it just feels better, but also it's just so simple. It's so plain. We don't have these large-scale theatrics of dealing with royalty and royal issues and noble houses and, you know, all these fantastical elements that just seem so out of reach from the normal everyday person. And I get that with fantasy, it's an escape. You know, people watch fantasy and they watch make-believe shows to escape the reality. Sometimes people just don't want to watch the real world shit going on. They want an escape from their real life, and I get that. However, I think it's so important to also show in these shows just the regular, everyday, mundane people. In A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, in these first 3 episodes, we are essentially witnessing what is the majority population of Westeros. We are like down in the gutter and in the trenches with just a regular hedge knight who has dreams and aspirations, but fears and anxieties about it also. We are witnessing the actual reality of Westeros, of this fantasy world that we have built over a decade, and it's been going on in the book form for literal decades. And I think it's so nice and so just simple and effective to finally see a series of just regular people in the show. Like, I enjoy the fact that we have a main character who is just, we get to see him just walking through the fields and trudging through and reminiscing on his life up until this point and contemplating a career after his own only known family. The knight that he has known his entire life has just died. And him contemplating a career in the same area, but knowing the fears and the horrors that come with it. I like that we get to see, you know, real contemplation and real anxiety. And, you know, also too, we get to see this guy fall in love or have a crush and, you know, stumble his way through life and real things that people go through and that real people would experience in this fantasy world in their everyday life. And also, I'm going to say it, I enjoy the poop humor. Maybe that's the only thing childlike about me, about the viewers of this show, but I think it is funny, and I like the comedic aspect that they are putting into this series. It's nice to have what seems such low stakes, you know, choices and lessons for these 2 characters like Dunk and Egg. They're supposedly just ordinary, normal people in this world. They're just, it's not like the royal high stakes, like it's eat or be eaten, it's killed or be killed. These are they took my throne, we have to avenge them, we have to overthrow them. Oh, the politics of the royal court in Westeros. I like instead kind of seeing just a new comedic bumbling duo, basically. And yeah, you know, we have the Targaryens in this series. They're kind of humbling themselves and going to a local joust, which is maybe embarrassing for them. We still get the elements of royalty in this show because obviously you cannot have a Westeros Song of Ice and Fire show without having the fucking Targaryens in it. That would just be insane. They're a dynasty. They rule forever. There are always going to be people who are like, where are the Starks at? But can we get a Stark thrown in there? No. Hey, no. I get that they were a huge facet of Game of Thrones. We have left the Starks behind, and that is okay. They have their story. They can be part of many plots in House of the Dragon and in these other stories, but I don't understand people complaining about seeing more Targaryens, if there are people who complain about it, over the Starks, because it's like, the Targaryens are the dynasty of this entire kingdom. They ruled for like 200, 300, however many years. They literally overthrew, they conquered all of it, you know? Of course we're hearing about them, and we're going to see more of them. But I digress. I know some may find it boring just to see these mundane things going on in the show, and they're just like, nothing's happening. They're just talking. They're just stargazing. They're just, he's bumbling around. Dunk is just kind of, he's a dork and a goof. But I think this is more realistic than what we have witnessed so far in the fantasy world of Westeros. That's why it feels so refreshing. And it's effective, you know? Like, Ira Parker, the showrunner, was like, we might not be throwing a kid out the window the first episode, but like, give it time. It will get there, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that this series for the first few episodes is any less worthy of viewing or any less worthy of praise just because it is more slow-paced and shorter episode runtime. Now, there's only 3 episodes out, so I can't speak to how the rest of the series is going to be. It might take a dark turn. I think I read somewhere that the showrunner says that, the rest of the season is going to take a more gritty, darker turn, and that's fine. But it's okay to have build up to that. We don't need necessarily to see just violence and gore and just action literally from the get-go. I know the other two series are based off of that, and I'm sure A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is going to also have that as well, but we don't necessarily have to have it right away. We can have some build-up and some anticipation for it, and especially with how episode 3 ends, it probably is going to take that turn. Some secrets come to light, and so we're going to have that gritty, dark element. Right now, we've had such a lighthearted kind of vibe to it, where it's just kind of country living. It's kind of, slower. I keep saying slower paced, but it's slower paced. But that doesn't mean just because it'll eventually take a dark turn that these first few episodes just need to be omitted from memory, that they're not worth watching, they're not worth remembering or even rewatching or rehashing. They're vital to the story. They're vital to the plot of Dunk and Egg, how they form and how they come together as a little comedic duo. And I think that's fine. I think that's okay for us to have. It feels like we live in a day and age where streaming services and even television and movies are just trying to produce so much fucking content. They're trying to produce quantity over quality, and therefore the writing and the process, it just feels like watered down and like, I hate to use the word slop, but it feels like they're just feeding us slop all the time. And they're just like, well, yeah, you pigs will eat it up. You guys will eat it up no matter what. They slap a franchise name onto it, cough, cough, Disney and Marvel, and they'll be like, audiences will eat it up, whether it's good or not, whether it's quality or not, whether we want to take the time and effort to make a good, well-rounded show doesn't matter, because we know if we slap whatever name onto it, fans will eat it up. However, with that being said, with all of that, being at the forefront, even Netflix has admitted they're designing shows for people that aren't even really watching it, because what's the fucking point? It makes me appreciate the shows that do put in that effort, that do put in that time and quality, and they want to make a valuable show that people will love and enjoy. They want to have long, drawn-out dialogue. I know that was a thing in the original Game of Thrones series. The seriousness was what made it so good as well. And I think we're kind of losing that plot a little bit, but I think they're kind of bringing it back with The Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Shows don't want to have the long, drawn-out conversations and the long things that take time to develop and to emphasize. But as well, I think with seasons dwindling, we used to have, 24-episode series. Now it reduced to 12. Game of Thrones was only like 10 to 12 episodes. Now, a lot of series are reducing to even 8 episodes. A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is only going to have like 6 or 7 episodes with runtimes of roughly 30 minutes. But that works for the show. They're going off of novellas, so the framework makes sense. For a series like Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, where you have so much source material to work with, it doesn't really vibe. It doesn't really make sense, because you need that extra time to develop and to plot and to flesh out everything going on. The Night of the Seven Kingdoms is taking time to develop, to draw out the plot and draw out the characters and put emphasis on them, that and their relationships and their bonds. And that's okay. We live in a time now where our brains are constantly needing dopamine, and if we're not getting it, we get frustrated, we get bored, we're annoyed that nothing's happening. I think this is also a way to kind of remind us that we can just enjoy it. We don't need to have a constant influx of information. We don't need to constantly be scrolling social media, doom scrolling, or going over content to like feed that little part of our brain that's like, we need it. It's giving us an opportunity to just sit and exist with the show and to just be for 30 minutes, even if it is just 30 minutes. It's giving us a reminder to just simply exist and take in the information of the show for what it is. And I am so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for the slow and quiet pacing of the show so far. I'm glad that they have offered us just a little reprieve from the series and the in your face all the time of the House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. And I think it's working in its favor. That might shift with the next 3 episodes or the next 4 episodes, but I think for what it is right now, it's something that we all needed for the franchise. Just almost like a break from the gritty and just tense. It just feels like anxious, tense slop that we've been getting. And I think it's working in its favor. So if you think it's boring and you're not enjoying it, okay, that's your opinion. You're free to have that. I have my opinion on it as well. I just made an entire video about it. But I think if you do think it's boring and you think, not enough is happening, just maybe rethink how you're looking at it. Rethink your viewpoint of how you're viewing the show. Think of it as a good thing. that it's giving you that time to just sit and exist with the characters and the reality and mundane world of Westeros. Maybe just reevaluate your thinking of it, and you'll come to look at the show in a better light. But I digress. I have ranted long enough about it. I could make several videos about things I enjoy about it and why I think X, Y, and Z happened with House of the Dragon Season 2. But if you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more Game of Thrones content, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, feel free to comment your thoughts on the show if you think it's bad or if you think it's going great or what you hope for the future of the franchise as a whole, especially with House of the Dragon being renewed for Season 4. Season 3 comes out this year, and then Season 4 probably another 2 years. Hopefully Season 3 can redeem it. But yeah, comment down below if you enjoyed this video. If not, don't dislike it, because I will cry if you dislike it. If you would like to see specific content related to Game of Thrones, comment down below what you would like my opinion on or would like to see me talk about. I don't mind, I like yapping about this stuff. I also like yapping about Bridgerton, Scooby-Doo, and many other shows that I plan to make videos on. I had just watched episode 3, and I wanted to share my grievances with people who were saying it was boring or not enjoyable so far. Just give it time. Give it a rest. Let's relax a little bit and just enjoy the show for what it is.